UConn women's basketball went 38-1, dominated the Big East, and looked like a national title machine. Until South Carolina ended the run with a 62-48 Final Four shocker. So what actually changed for 2026-27? Was it one bad night, or did the Gamecocks expose the blueprint for beating UConn? In this debate-style breakdown, we look at the lessons from UConn's near-perfect season, Sarah Strong's next step, Azzi Fudd's departure, and why UCLA's national championship adds even more pressure to the Huskies' reset.
Prime Field!
What if I told you UConn went 38-1 and that one loss changed the entire conversation? Not a bad season, not a collapse, but a reset. Because South Carolina didn't just beat UConn in the Final Four, they held the Huskies to 48 points, ended a 54-game winning streak, and forced the question nobody in stores wants to hear. Was 2025-26 the peak of this version of UConn or the beginning of the next monster? Welcome back! Today we're debating the UConn women's basketball reset after a nearly perfect season. We're talking what the South Carolina loss exposed, what still makes UConn terrifying, and what changes for 2026-27, with Sarah Strong stepping deeper into the spotlight and Azzi Fudd moving on. And here's the thesis. UConn didn't fail because it wasn't elite. UConn failed because at the highest level, elite is not enough if one matchup can take away your rhythm, your spacing, and your confidence. So the debate is simple. Does Geno's team need a tweak or a transformation? Let's start with respect. UConn finished 38-1, went 20-0 in the Big East, and spent the season stacking wins like it was routine. Sports Reference lists the Huskies at 38-1, and the official UConn box score from the South Carolina game confirms that final record. This wasn't just cupcakes either. The Big East schedule page shows early wins over Louisville, Ohio State, and Michigan, including a tight 72-69 Michigan win that gave UConn real resume weight. But here's where the debate starts. Did that dominance hide the problem? Because when you win by 30, you don't always have to solve late clock pressure. When your defense smothers everyone, you don't always have to win ugly. And when you have Azzi Fudd spacing the floor, shot making becomes the emergency exit. Then South Carolina locked the emergency exit. The Gamecocks won 62-48. UConn scored just 13 in the third quarter and 9 in the fourth, according to the official box score. That is not just losing. That is getting squeezed possession by possession. So pro UConn fans will say, one bad night, one matchup, one loss after 38 wins. Fair. But the other side says, that one loss came when the opponent looked like the more physically disruptive team. And that matters because March is not about your average night. March is about your worst matchup. The first lesson. UConn needs more ways to win when the first option is gone. South Carolina's defense was described by UConn's own recap as stifling, and that's exactly what it looked like. Tanea Latson scored 16, Agate McKeer added 14, and South Carolina controlled the game enough to advance to the national title game. Debate point 1, was UConn too dependent on clean offense? Because when the Huskies were flowing, they looked unstoppable. But when South Carolina made catches harder, pushed actions wider, and turned possessions into late clock decisions, UConn didn't have enough counters. Debate point 2. Was this a personnel issue or a style issue? UConn had talent, no debate, but South Carolina made the game feel heavier. More bodies, more contact, more pressure on every pass. The tweak argument says, add one more creator, improve counters, keep the core system. The transformation argument says no. This roster has to get more downhill, more physical, and more comfortable winning 64-60 instead of 90-52. And that's where 2026-27 gets spicy. Here's the part UConn fans should love. Sarah Strong is still there. UConn's current roster page lists Strong as a sophomore forward, and ESPN's way too early 2026-27 rankings called her one of the biggest reasons UConn should still thrive, even after Azzi Fudd's departure. That changes the whole conversation, because this is not a rebuild. This is a handoff. Strong gives UConn the thing every title team needs, a player who can bend the game on both ends. ESPN specifically highlighted her complete offensive game and defensive impact, calling UConn the best defensive team in the country last season. But here's the debate. Can Strong be the best player on a championship team if the guard play around her changes? Because Azzi Fudd wasn't just a scorer, she was gravity. Defenders had to know where she was every second. The Big East announced Fudd as a UConn alumna attending the 2026 WNBA draft, which confirms the obvious shift. The veteran shot-making safety net is gone. So now UConn has to answer 3 questions. Can the next guards create advantage before the defense is set? Can Strong punish doubles fast enough to keep the floor open? And can the Huskies replace Fudd's big shot calm when the game slows down? Because the South Carolina game gave future opponents a blueprint. Make UConn uncomfortable, force late clock offense, and see who can hit tough shots. This is where UConn fans split into 2 camps. Camp 1 says, it's UConn. Geno adapts. The roster still has size, skill, and elite development. That's not blind faith. The official roster still lists major frontcourt pieces like Sarah Strong, Sarah Williams, Ice Brady, and others, meaning UConn has real size and options. Camp 2 says, the sport is changing too fast to assume continuity equals dominance. UCLA just won the 2026 national championship, beating South Carolina 79-51, according to the NCAA. That means the title picture is not just UConn and South Carolina. UCLA is here. The field is deeper. The portal era moves fast. And that's the real reset. UConn is still UConn. But the margin for whiff being almost perfect is shrinking. So what has to change? First, more physical counters. Not just pretty offense, pressure-proof offense. Second, more downhill guard creation. You need someone who can break the first defender when the set dies. Third, stronger late-game identity. In March, your playbook shrinks. Your stars decide games. UConn has Strong. Now the question is who becomes option 1B? My prediction, UConn enters 2026-27 as a title contender, not a title favorite by default. The ceiling is championship. The floor is still Final Four level. But whether they win, it all depends on whether the offense becomes more adaptable after losing Fudd's spacing and shot making. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The South Carolina loss might be the best thing that could have happened to UConn long term. Not emotionally, not in the moment, but strategically. Because 38-1 can lie to you. It can tell you everything is fine. A 48 loss tells you exactly what has to be fixed. And if Sarah Strong becomes the full-on engine if the guards level up, and if Geno builds a team that can win both pretty and ugly, then this reset might look less like the end of an era and more like the warning shot before UConn comes back meaner. So now I'm asking you, was the Final Four loss a fluke? Or did South Carolina expose the blueprint? Drop your take in the comments. Subscribe for more women's hoops breakdowns because this 2026-27 season is about to be chaos. And vote in the poll before you go.
Prime Field